artificial intelligence is invisibly running our lives and is expected to bring far more profound changes to humanity. But in part one of this discussion, Meredith Whittaker and Camille Francois challenged many of the notions that we have about AI.
These are not technologies of the many. We are the subjects of AI. We are not the users of AI in most cases.
When you get to bigger models that are trained on more data, racial biases and stereotypes get worse.
And in this final episode, these amazing women discuss big tech and how to navigate the world of AI. So, how do we make AI less discriminatory? How do we resolve its issues with privacy? And how do we tackle the surveillance business model?
Well, hello.
Hello again, Meredith.
Wonderful to be here, Camille.
Wonderful to be here with you. Last time we chatted, we talked about risks in AI. Why are some people worried about AI taking over the world and destroying humanity? What is the thing that we call existential risk? Where is this coming from? How do you feel about that?
Oh, wow. Well, existential risk is a thrilling story at a libidinal and emotional level. It's very activating to think of, doom and conflict in these sort of, great power scenarios. And it's kind of catnip to a lot of powerful men. The idea that AI, this scraped data, big compute, big models, is going to somehow find the escape velocity to become sentient and superhuman, and we had better hold on because we either need to control that powerful AI, or we're going to be superseded by it. There's no evidence that existential risk is going to happen. I think there's a lot of questions around, like, why now did it catch on so powerfully? And I think a part of the answer to that question, and I know, Camille, you think about this as well, is that it's, while there are some true believers for whom this is very meaningful, and I don't want to take that away from them, this is also an extraordinarily good advertisement for these technologies. Because what military, what government, what multinational doesn't want access to this hyper powerful AI, doesn't want to be the one who's sort of controlling it, doesn't want to imagine themselves at the helm of the Death Star. And this advertisement also serves to distract from the fact that these systems continue to be discriminatory, and that discriminatory capacity continues to accelerate. The fact that these systems are used by the powerful on those with less power in ways that often obscure accountability for harmful decisions. The fact that we're talking about a technology that is built on the basis of concentrated surveillance power like the world has never seen, right? But we can erase all of that by being like, look over there, the Terminator is coming.
Yeah, you talked about it. It's not exactly a new idea, right? Nick Bostrom wrote Superintelligence now 10 years ago. It's a book that sort of focuses on that idea that AI will accelerate to a point where it can no longer be controlled by humans and will pose an existential risks. The fact that today this concept dominates some of our conversation on safety is meaningful and worrisome, though, because we're at that pivotal moment where we have governments, for instance, for the first time saying, hey, we would like to organize and to discuss what does safety mean in the context of AI. And so we have governments coming to the table. We saw it with the AI Safety Summit. We saw a series of first declarations, first regulations. There's the White House executive order in the US, the Hiroshima process coming out of the G7. And so there is this urgency to define what is it that we're worried about and that we want our elected representatives to protect us from and to focus on when we talk about the safety of AI. So I think you're right. It doesn't mean that everybody should be laser focused on avoiding Terminator scenarios. It also means that we need to focus on the very immediate harms to society, the biases, the discrimination, the surveillance implications, which we haven't talked about just yet. I see your surveillance eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Should we get there?
Smelt in the furnace of concerns over surveillance and privacy. And I think we were around Google at, I think 2014 or so we met, but that was the post-Snowden era, right? So we came out of the 90s in the US with a regulatory framework that had no guardrails on private surveillance. So a private company could surveil anything, right? And they could surveil it in the name of advertising, right? And so we get, after the 90s and this sort of, permissionless surveillance, you see a lot of very cozy partnerships between the US and other governments and these private surveillance actors, right? So, getting data from them in certain ways, brokering relationships, convincing them to create backdoors in their systems. And this is documented in the Snowden archives, which of course happened in 2013. So this was a shock to the system.
Take a moment to define what's a backdoor.
A backdoor is a, generally intentional flaw in a secure system that allows a third party access to contents or communications. So, it would, if we're using an encrypted system, say you and I are texting, and we think that is secure. But in fact, the code is allowing a government or a third party to access that and to surveil our communication. So a backdoor is sort of, the colloquial term for a flaw in the system that allows that kind of access.
I think here the critical security concept is this idea that you can't have a backdoor that's only for the good guys. And so if there's a hole in your system, there's a hole in your system. I think that's why we care so much about strong end-to-end encryption and making sure that when we say a system is secure, it's secure for everybody and from everybody.
Yeah, it either works for everyone, and that means I can't see it. That means the UK government can't see it. That means Putin can't see it. That means XYZ hackers can't see it. Or it's broken, and we can all see it.
So you were saying 2013, big moment of reckoning in Silicon Valley over privacy and those concepts of surveillance.
Yeah, and that was, kind of the world I lived in, right? Watching this privatized surveillance apparatus at Google, that had been justified on, hey, we have a duty to our customers and we're just giving people, more useful ads and more useful services. But Snowden kind of broke that open, right? And since then, there's been a kind of uneasy situation where, encryption has been added to some things, but the pipeline of data and data collection and data creation continues because that is, again, monetizing surveillance is the economic engine of the tech industry. And so, again, what happened in 2012? There was a recognition that this surveillance data could also be used to train and tune AI, and that these AI systems were incredibly good at both conducting surveillance. So think about facial recognition, think about productivity monitoring. I think that we have to read AI as almost a surveillance derivative, right? It pulls from this surveillance business model. It requires this surveillance data and the infrastructures that are constructed to process and store this data. And it produces more data and sort of heightens the surveillance ecosystem that we all live in.
It's also what I've observed working on disinformation and on troll farms in 2017. I was doing some field work, before that, around 2015, and working with those journalists and human rights activists, including Maria, who were so often targeted by governments. Their phones were being hacked. We were very concerned about making sure that they had secure software. We could secure their phones, secure their computers. They were very much under heavy surveillance. I remember they were the first ones to say, hey, there's something a bit off that's happening on social media. And we think it's harmful, we think it's violence, and we think it's related to the hacking. We should take it seriously, and we should try to uncover what's really going on, and we should really apply the same rigors and tools that we had in our work on cybersecurity and say, we can analyze this, we can do forensics, we might even be able to attribute it. If we see networks of fake accounts that are deployed against a journalist or a human rights activist with the sole purpose of silencing them, threatening them, and we might be able to hold a few people accountable in this process. We were, of course, sort of slow to do that as an industry, and that created the sort of great reckoning of 2017, right? What it took for Silicon Valley to care about that is really the US presidential election of 2016 and the fact that Russia was able to use what we now call troll farms, right? A series of handful of fake accounts to have, to have a campaign against these presidential elections. And what followed after is a full year of technology executives having to go to Congress and justify why they had missed it. So that, I think, was also sort of similarly a really pivotal moment where some new foundations were established for, okay, maybe we now live in a world where, as a society, we feel that technology companies have a responsibility to protect democracies too. And that we feel technology companies have a responsibility to tackle disinformation and then to think about how their technologies can be abused to manipulate elections. That is also something that's coming up for us in AI in a really interesting way.
But what I am concerned about, in addition to those very real, very pernicious problems that happen when you mass scale a global, information and social platform, again, incentivized for sort of clicks and engagement and profits and surveillance and advertising, is that the solution space, in my view, seems not to go far enough. So you have something like the UK's Online Safety Act, which is this massive omnibus bill that was catalyzed through these very real concerns, right? What do we do about these problems? But they rarely look at that business model and the sort of, they take as a given these mass social platforms. And then the solutions often look a lot like extending surveillance and control to governments, expanding the surveillance apparatus of large tech companies to, government-chosen NGOs or government actors who will then have a hand in determining what is acceptable speech, what is acceptable content, but is not actually looking at, how do we attack the surveillance business model that is at the heart of this engine? And so, this is very real for me, and we're both based in the US, but we now have, books being banned in certain states. We have, reproductive health care or healthcare in general unavailable to many people in states where reproductive health care has been criminalized. So, I really worry about these problems with platforms, about the way they exacerbate hate and allow trolling and disinformation. I also really worry about the solution space when that is handing a key to governments that would lock up a woman and her daughter for accessing healthcare, that would ban books, and that, across the world are trending toward the authoritarian.